I felt like as a child, I had this big imagination, but I couldn't really explore it because there's a lot of, you talk too much, you ask too many questions, and it's almost perceived as being disrespectful.
Right.
So that was the first thing for me, was just how how do you find your voice, right?
Welcome to another edition of Break the Code. I'm Naya, your host, and today I have another exciting guest. She's my sister, my friend. I can't even call you my friend. She's my sister.
Yes.
Yes. We've done life together across continent.
Indeed.
Traveled to many places, met each other, crisscrossing the world, and I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yay! I've been waiting for my turn to get on the show, so it's great to be here.
Yes, so this is Abam Mambo. She is, I have to read some of it before I add my little touch to it, okay? So she is a global speaker and an award-winning lawyer. And, you know, I just love when you speak because she always is telling such a heartwarming, teaching story that is transformational, honestly. Like, I love when you speak. So, award-winning global speaker, lawyer, Abam Mambo is helping leaders cultivate a culture of belonging.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that because I know you're doing that within organizations, but in this season of my life, I'm thinking about my journey and how belonging has been so important, but how so often I felt like I didn't.
Yes.
And not just within work, but in community and so on and so forth. So I'm so excited to talk about that. Can I keep reading this? With over 15 years of experience, don't mind she's looking like a little 12-year-old, okay? As a C-suite and HR advisor, employment and workplace investigations lawyer, people leader, management consultant, can I go on? For Fortune 500 companies, law firms across Africa, Asia, and the United States.
Mother of one.
Mother of one, sought after speaker, and you really like to talk on topics like what?
So I speak primarily on belonging, and I help organizations foster a culture of belonging where people can feel like they're seen, they're heard, they're valued, and they're respected. And it's funny that we're talking about belonging this season, Naya, because we're 3 years post first year of the pandemic,
Yes.
where we were isolated and we were at home on the lockdown, and people just felt, coming out of the pandemic, loneliness spiked, isolation spiked, productivity increased, but job satisfaction actually reduced.
Right.
So I began talking about belonging because there was this sense of just, am I in this alone, right? It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart because belonging, as Abraham Maslow said, is one of our 5 hierarchy of needs. In that wrong is our third, right? Love and belonging. And we just don't talk about it. It feels very touchy-feely, so we don't like to go there. But
you've managed to take the touchy-feely out of it. And, well, not necessarily, right? But to streamline what belonging can look like.
Yes.
And I think that is so fascinating. So on Break the Code, we're really talking about our programming, right? The things that make us who we are, the culture that we were brought up in, and how that led us to where we are. And then sometimes culture works in our favor, and sometimes it works against all the things that make us uniquely ourselves. So, again, I know some of your story, but how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey from, however you can summarize upbringing into corporate leadership, entrepreneurship, and then creating your own thing, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So let's hear a little bit about you.
Uh, wow, where do I start? Identity, I think it's a great place for me to start. Identity is a really huge part of what I talk about and of who I am. So I always kind of start there. I am Cameroonian by birth, by heritage, by culture. Very, very proud of it. I really had Aero and Gary for breakfast this morning. Don't judge me. It was delicious. And, it was 3 days old. That's the best kind of Aero.
Oh, yes.
And I'm a US citizen, and I've lived in South Africa, and I've lived in Singapore. I live in Singapore now. And the reason why I mention this now is because when it comes to identity, we sometimes get locked into this idea we're either a woman, or African, or black, or mother.
Mm-hmm.
But identity is this amalgamation of different things that we are every day.
It's fluid.
Right, it's fluid, absolutely. And so for me, I identify as Cameroonian, American, and mother, and a sister, and lawyer. And my journey has been that background in employment law, 15 years, I cannot believe it. I feel like I graduated yesterday. I'm a mother of a wonderful 13-year-old boy. Was a mama's boy. Love that too. I am, what can I say? I'm a writer. That's one thing.
There's also an author. I forgot to say that.
Yeah. And the thing, I think, besides motherhood, the crowning glory of my career, my life so far, has been creating what I call the belonging quotient. The belonging quotient is, this idea I created, which actually assesses our commitment, our willingness, our ability, and our action plan to create a space where people feel like they belong. Right?
So being intentional about belonging.
Being very intentional about it.
Why did you think it was important?
For many reasons. One of them being, as a woman growing up in Cameroon, and we went roads, right?
Yes.
We were told ladies are seen and not heard.
Yes.
I mean, are they mirrors? I felt like if you were opinionated, you were made to feel like you didn't belong. Now, which kind of talk this, right?
Yes.
Or which kind of strong-headed woman this? What kind of strong woman is this? So we were alienated from ourselves by culture. We're talking about breaking the code. I care about this because I think belonging starts with self. We have to belong to ourselves first. But a lot of our upbringing taught us to push back on who we are fundamentally. So if you were opinionated, loud-mouthed, or just talkative, you were told ladies are not heard. So that disrupts the foundation of who you are,
Right.
foremost. How can you belong in a community, in a family, if you don't first belong to yourself? So that's why it was important to me now, was to give us a way to kind of get back to ourselves foremost. Because once you build the self, you can rebuild the family, then you can rebuild the community.
Amazing. Well, let's kind of pull that back a bit, right? Because when we're talking about culture and upbringing, and you're saying we came from a society where if you talk too much, if you were loud, you're seen and not heard. How did that impact the woman that you were, say, or the young lady that you were? Did you feel like you had to be quiet, or were you the child that was always pushing against the grain, or like, how would you, if you looked at your 10, 12-year-old self, what was the process and what was the journey for you to now even create belonging IQ?
So that's an amazing question. A huge part of belonging IQ focuses on speak-up culture. And I got there because, again, as a child, you're told, I was actually told I talk too much. And it's not because I used too many words, it was because I questioned a lot. There were things that just didn't make sense to me, right, as a child. So, and I was fearless about asking adults questions. So I'd ask these questions and they'd begin to over talk.
When you ask, so when you ask a question, they say you talk too much.
Yes. And that's
Don't ask questions.
exactly. And so that was a way to silence. And when we silence, something really dangerous happens. One, we don't learn. Right?
Yeah.
Kids are really innocent and they ask questions in the most sincere way.
Right.
So when you shut them down, you're actually missing an opportunity to learn, right? And so for me, that was the first thing. I felt like as a child, I had this big imagination, but I couldn't really explore it because there was a lot of, you talk too much, you ask too many questions, and I, it's almost perceived as being disrespectful.
Correct.
So that was the first thing for me was just how do you find your voice, right? The second thing into how it shaped me was becoming a lawyer. How do you advocate if you cannot speak? How do you represent if you cannot speak? How do you, and there are many ways of speaking, right? You can speak vocally, verbally, or you can write. But a lot of what I wanted to see change in society depended on me having a voice. And so not having that was problematic for me. So I think the way it shaped me was I found different ways to be loud without speaking.
Give us some examples.
Writing. Writing is a powerful way to be loud without speaking.
Absolutely.
Choosing how you show up. Some people wear really loud colors, right? They're not saying anything. When they enter a room, you know they're there. So that's one of the first things I learned. How can you be really, really loud without saying a word? That's how I did it. And the third thing was being observant. I think many of us presume that speaking has to do with just you kind of doing the speaking. Sometimes the most powerful way to effect change and to foster a sense of belonging is listening and being observant. Because you walk away the wiser in any situation, right?
Yeah.
So the three things I did was just, learning how to be loud without speaking, being observant and picking the things that other people didn't see, and then just consciously pushing against the grain, but quietly.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I think is that, being observant has to be an intentional action. Whether it's as a parent, as a child, in the workplace, because so often we can stay within our silos or within our predetermined routines.
Yep.
And that will kind of bar us from witnessing what else is happening, and then that gives us something to talk about.
Yes.
Right? Gives us the ability to speak up. So I'm so glad you said that, being observant, because sometimes when we think of showing up, you're just thinking, like you said, let's show up. But I think we were talking about this earlier today. I'm in some WhatsApp group, and you're like, why are you in there? But for me right now, it's observing, because I can only learn and understand by being a part of something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's why I'm so excited about this belonging. For the longest time, proudly Cameroonian, right? Also American, but never felt like I quite belonged in any of the spaces, right?
Yes.
Whether it's corporate, even sometimes within my own family, because I'm the entrepreneur, right? And everybody else is, maybe not corporate, but they're doing the typical go to school, get a job.
Yeah.
Our parents did that. And here goes Naya with yet another business, So that sense of belonging, sometimes I felt like I really desired it, but never felt like it. And also, even from my skin tone, my family, right?
Yes.
Everyone is a bit deeper in complexion.
Yes.
And I'm fair. no skin bleaching. That's just how I came out,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so people look at you and question,
Mm-hmm.
are you really part of that family?
Yeah.
And if you knew me as a child, I would stay in the sun because I wanted to be darker. I would, yeah, because I wanted to look like I belonged. And then even living here in the U.S., joining Cameroon community, or trying to be a part of community, they address you as Ajabo, right? I hated that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm older, maybe that it doesn't really bother me, but sometimes it's still like, come on now, like how much more do I have to do to show you that I'm one of, yeah. So I think I'm so excited that you're doing this in the corporate world. One, I've worked in spaces that were like predominantly Asian.
Yes.
And then show up as a black woman. Like,
yes.
You know,
My current lived experience, yes.
current lived experience.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm living in Asia now for 5.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love that you raised that issue, Naya, of wanting to be darker so you could fit in. Because I think we always talk about the part where being darker is a problem. But I've also heard comments like, she's only beautiful because she's light skinned.
Mm-hmm.
If she were darker, we wouldn't think she's beautiful.
Right.
Right. Or we always talk about how people are a bit anti thickness. If you're African, you know we're outside skinniness. And I have been accosted and said, you're too thin. So we're too fat, we're too thin. No one's ever happy with where we are. We're too dark, we're too light, we're always too something.
Too something.
And my question is, by whose barometer? By who's measuring this, right? And so I'm glad you brought it up because we always look at it from one prism of darkness or being bigger. But I tell you, the number of times people have stopped me in parties to say, you need to eat. And I say, no, I don't. This is how I'm built, and it's okay. Living in Asia it's been really interesting. Number one, nobody asked me about my dress size
because you can fit.
I can fit. When I lived in the US, finding a size 0 or size 2 was a real problem. In Asia, it is not.
Funny, I went to Korea and I like try to walk into the store and like, no size, no size.
I don't have to the plenty of my size in Asia. And I used to, it's interesting. I would go to Marshall Fields. If I really wanted to buy something, I would have to go right when the new shipment came in because they had very few of the zeros and the twos, right? So if I made it there late, it's gone because they're not that many. And in Asia, it's like I go walk into a shop in Korea or in Tokyo or in Singapore, and my size is just right there waiting for me. So in that sense, it's been great.
Right.
But also had interesting experiences where people have been like, "Can I touch your hair?" Right? I think the idea of belonging, for me, is really important because we are, I think, as Cameroonians, as Africans,
citizens of the world.
As citizens of the world, we all crave this need to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to be respected. And the reason why that matters so much is because if you think about when you motivate people, right?
Yeah.
Think about your two aunts. You have two aunts, Auntie Jane and Auntie Josiane, for example. You go to Auntie Jane's house, and all she does is tell you how awful you are, how difficult you are, all the things that you do wrong. I go to Auntie Josiane's house, and wake up and get she has your favorite meal.
Yeah.
She see how beautiful you look, right?
Yeah.
She encourages and supports you. Whose house will you go to your parents and say, where are you spending the holidays? Auntie Josiane. And that's why belonging is so important. It's affirmative.
It's affirmative.
And it's motivating, right? If you want And belonging coaching, you talk about corporate. Yes, I mostly do my work in corporate, but in families, in communities, I work there too. If you want to motivate people, you want people around you, you want to rah the tribe to get them to do something, you have to make them feel seen. You have to make them feel heard. You have to make them feel like they're valued and they are respected. Now, how do you do that? First, you learn to reach out. Right?
Yeah.
You reach out in good times and in bad times. So that's something a lot of us don't know how to do. What was that? We just call somebody and say, I'm just going to check on you. That's it. How are you?
Yeah.
Right? The second thing you need to do is be embracing of difference. I talk about it in the corporate space because we struggle with difference, right? If you want to really motivate people, embrace their difference. So what if they are overweight and they had a baby? So what? What if they took the way of the beaten path and instead of going to get an engineering or doctor or lawyer job, they went for something else? So what?
So what?
So what? Right? So I think first, reach out. Second, embrace difference. Be inclusive, but also embrace commonality. Right? I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I want to be part of the Kenyan community."
Big one.
It's huge.
Yeah. So maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like, what is the essence of that statement when you're saying, I don't want to be part of the community? What are they really communicating?
So, I wouldn't say, first of all, that it's self-hate. A lot of people might came and say, if you say you don't want to be part of your community, you are self-hating.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily the case.
I agree with you. Yeah.
I think sometimes, I think you put this very nicely. Now, you said culture can sometimes work for us or against us. If you're in a community that again and again and again rejects who you are, at some point, you will cut the cord for your own sanity and your own health. So I get that. If you're a part of a community which does not listen, which does not allow you to reach out, which is not receptive to who you are as a person, to the ideas you bring, at some point you will find a place that accepts and welcomes you.
100%.
So I think when I hear that statement, what I'm hearing are layers of things. One is, I don't feel like I belong in this community. That's the first thing I hear. There's something about my community that is rejecting me.
Exactly.
What sounds like I'm rejecting my community is actually my community is rejecting me.
Boom.
And a lot of us don't realize that. Right? That's the first thing. Examine, why would someone who grew up in a particular culture say, I don't want to be part of this? There is something steeped in there that's rejecting them.
Right.
And they're not feeling welcome. So they're saying, I don't feel welcome. I'll go somewhere else.
Right.
And so I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, some people just fundamentally believe that they just don't want to be a part of something, whatever that thing is. They don't identify with it on some level. And that's okay.
And that's fine. You said we should embrace
difference.
That's okay. Yeah.
Because, there's some lifestyle that are just not for you, right? And so you can say, this is not my lane. It's not my lane, it's not my tribe.
Yeah.
And it's okay. I'm very reticent to label things as self-hate because people, you have to dig into personal dynamics to understand why they're rejecting something.
And I think that even goes into the conversation on colorism.
Yes.
Because too often, and I know I used to do the whole color conversations thing, and I learned in the process that, we've labeled skin lightening as self-hate, right? But if we really dig deep down into the undertone of what they're expressing, there's so much more there beyond self-hate, right?
Yes. And it is, again, we have to kind of think about this backwards. Instead of assuming that they're rejecting their skin, what they're doing is they're responding to something in society that their skin is not beautiful. Correcting to find a way to belong.
Oh, yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So I think it's taken me time to understand the dynamic. You have to kind of sit back and watch. Why would someone spend thousands of dollars
And
and all that time and years, right?
they're not consistent in anything else.
Exactly.
That one thing.
Exactly. So I think as a society, we need to ask ourselves, when people are acting a certain way, what is it that they're responding to? We're better at finger pointing than at being self-examining.
Right.
And that's why I keep saying belonging starts from the self. Even as a community, you can ask your community self the question, am I seeing my people, hearing my people, respecting my people, valuing my people? If you don't value your people, guess what? They will go somewhere where they are valued.
And so, what questions should we be asking ourselves to help us on our journey to self-belonging?
I think the most important question is, who am I? That's a mammoth question.
Yes.
And it'll take you your whole lifetime to figure that out. But I think it starts to put you on the path, right?
Yeah.
It starts with, for me, it starts with, who am I? Recognizing that as much as I'm a speaker and an advocate, I'm inherently an introvert. Recognizing that balance made me much more comfortable with the need, like not needing to be in the spotlight. But as a child, I felt like I had this maybe a gift of speaking. I felt like I had to be in the middle of things. And so the first thing is just, who am I? Who am I? Again,
what makes me intrinsically me?
Me. And then we talk to people about loving the parts of themselves, or learning to love the parts of themselves that they hate. I say no. Start by celebrating the parts of you that you love. It's hard to empower people from a place of negativity. How about we start from, what do you love about yourself? Now, do you know how hard that question is?
It's very hard.
When I coach people with a good public speaking coaching for executives and entrepreneurs, I'll say to them, what is your biggest strength? A lot of people haven't thought about that.
Because we've been taught to respond to the question, what are your weaknesses?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how motivating is that? It's not.
So you sit and say, what am I bad at? And how do I need to fix myself?
And so we spend most of our lifetime doing what? Fixing the broken parts of ourselves, as opposed to amplifying the things that we're naturally good at.
Amplify. I love that word. I love that.
So what if we started there? What if we started with, what are you good at? What do you love? What do you bring to the table? What the value add?
Right.
As opposed to what you're not good at. Let's fix that. Which is our default. Think about breaking the code. Why don't we start there? Celebrating and amplifying those parts of ourselves that are good without looking at it as hubris. If I came out and I said, what I love about myself is my ability to connect dots. It's my ability to speak. It's my ability to be chameleon-like, right? I can fit in quite easily in many spaces. What if I say I'm beautiful? What is wrong with that? Why is that hubris? Why is that prideful?
Right.
But we've taught ourselves to dampen the parts of ourselves that are good. And to focus on fixing. So people are tired because we're not motivated by fixing. It's easier to lean into your glory than into your gore.
Girl, can you say that again? Tweet this, okay?
And that just came out of somewhere.
That's why I said somebody tweet it so we have a record.
It is easier. It is easier to lean into your glory than into your gore. Right. So why are we constantly focused on fixing the glory instead of fixing or celebrating the glory? That's the question. Why are we
preaching?
I told you, bring me here when I stop, right? Why are we constantly celebrating? Why are we constantly focused on fixing the glory? We could be celebrating the glory.
Wow.
And that to me is what belonging is all about. It's celebrating the glory as opposed to focusing on fixing the glory.
I love that. You just made it all make sense. When I think of my struggles in corporate, standing out as, whether it's the only Black person, let alone the only Black woman, and I'm thinking, what do I do to my hair?
Yes.
What tone of voice do I need to speak in
Yes.
for me not to be perceived as an aggressor?
Yes.
How do I show up and show that I'm qualified to be here without them questioning my capacity?
Yes.
So many layers that if they celebrated that she's such a great teacher, she can pull different cultures together and have them singing kumbaya, right? Like, if that was celebrated, I probably would have taken maybe stuck with some other things.
Yes.
Or yeah, now that I think about it, I think of the times I've left. What were the reasons,
So let me share on this point. Let me share an exercise I did at a talk. I stood on the podium and I asked the audience, when we talk about diversity, which is part of belonging, if you ask in America today, if you ask people to identify themselves, Black people, Hispanics, Asians, women, identify themselves foremost by their race and their gender. White men do not. Why does that matter? What I was saying to that particular audience was, if you've been taught to look at yourself through the limiting prism of race and gender, it's easy to lose sight of what else you bring to the table. So given what you just said, right, the way I look at it is, on the one hand, we deal with racism and sexism every day. On the other hand, as a Black woman, what do you see that your white counterparts don't? You have access to the dominant culture. The dominant culture does not have access to you.
And let alone, not only Black woman and African woman.
Right.
It allows me to navigate cultural spaces much more differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so my whole point to that audience was, we need to look at our difference, our Blackness, our females, our Africanness, our immigrantness, as a plus. Because it's an extra lens that you have. So if you have access to dominant culture, you can see, here's my example, shampoo. In fact, Rihanna, Fenty Beauty.
Right.
Why did it take so long? And why did it take a Black Barbadian woman? What am I talking about? Zolani Beauty.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
It took an African woman, a Barbadian woman, to say, we need makeup for all skin colors.
Yeah.
Why? Estee Lauder was there before you were.
Correct.
CoverGirl was there before you were.
Yes.
What makes the difference is you and your experience said, I know we have makeup for white women. They're not thinking about makeup for Black women, but I am. Because I'm Black. That gives me access to a world that they don't have, and therefore it gives me a business opportunity that they may not be thinking about. So my question to the audience is, what perspective do you have that gives you an advantage? And we usually look at our difference as a detriment. I really think it's a plus.
It's a plus.
It's a huge plus.
I'm so elated that you're bringing this up, because I think, especially as African women, it's how do we camouflage?
Yes.
How do we just blend in and nobody knows that we're African, right? And but that's what the essence of who we are is. What is really the difference maker,
Yes.
right? We can talk about healthcare. We can talk about, whether it's makeup. We can talk about even how we build our homes. Design and
Yeah.
architecture and everything. When you bring that cultural perspective,
Yeah.
you bring so much light.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that is breaking the code.
that is breaking the code.
If you can look at what is often perceived as a detriment as a plus, you are breaking the code. What if my blackness is an asset? That's what I'm concerned it is.
Yes.
What if my femaleness is an asset? That's what I'm concerned it is.
Yes.
What if my Cameroonianness, my Africanness, my motherness, right,
Yes.
is an asset? It is.
Mm-hmm.
We think about Jessica Alba,
Right.
and her multi-million-dollar company now. That's a woman who was thinking about, well, uh, how can I transform baby's clothes, right, and make it more healthy and sustainable and clean.
Mm-hmm.
A woman thought of that.
Yes.
Her womanness made her think of that.
Mm.
So I think we really need to think about how a difference actually is a positive and a negative, right? And this goes back to amplifying the glory as opposed to trying to constantly fix the glory. Or what seems like the glory.
Or what has been for centuries,
Yeah,
put into the glory box.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But where do we go from there? That's absolutely incredible. So belonging IQ. Let's just
Yeah.
wrap up with telling us how that got started. I mean, you've kind of told us the story, but how are you using this now, and how is it? You're a world changer. I know that, like, the audacity to think, let's create a space for belonging. What gives you that? Like, sometimes I think I have all these ideas, and I'm like, why would anyone listen to me? Do you ever think that?
No.
Okay, good. That's why belonging is important, right?
Yes. The reason I don't think that is because I'm stubborn.
Good.
But talking about audaciousness or audacity, okay. When I've always kind of felt like my path was one of community building. Because I grew up with really strong women, right, who lady shake skin.
Yeah.
Right? They make a way where there's no way. And so I was taught that early. When I stepped out of, because I was at Microsoft before I went and created Belonging IQ, I was thinking I'm comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice paycheck, 401k,
right? All the goodies.
I didn't think who would listen to me.
What were you thinking?
What I was thinking was there's a need, number one.
Mm-hmm.
I have earned the credibility to speak in this space. But the most empowering thing was I thought about IQ, intelligence quotient.
Yeah.
I thought about EQ, emotional intelligence. I thought about I think it's Carol Dweck's growth mindset. Right. Mm-hmm. All of these things which are now part of the corporate kind of speak.
Yeah.
And I thought, these people who created these ideas are human, just like you and me.
Exactly.
They eat, they drink, they poop, they sleep. What make them?
Yeah, and it's adapted, it's taught. Everything that we learn in school, someone said, let's make it into something that more people need to learn about.
Someone.
I'm
a someone. You're a someone. Right?
Yes.
That was the most empowering thing for me, was to say a human being created this. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
What's my excuse? What's my reason to not lean in to my calling? That was the most empowering thing, was recognizing that I was not less than. If they could do it, why couldn't I?
Right. And so, talking about leaning into your calling, now let's go, it's like full circle back to childhood, the talk, loud mouth, ask the many questions, and that core essence of you was always there. And then through the fire, through the journey, everything, it's been refined to be able to, package it into this one thing that we all need.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely incredible and beautiful, and gives space for us to talk about belonging. Meanwhile, sometimes so many of us didn't even think it was a thing, right? Like, before COVID, not a lot of people were talking about mental health. It's always been. We've always needed to make sure that we were mentally sane. But if no one was bringing it to the table, so many lives have been saved. I'm just excited that you're doing this, because lives are going to be saved. Communities are going to be shaped. People are going to be changed, and it's fabulous. So thank you.
You're welcome. For me, and this makes me a bit emotional, right? Because when I started this journey, I started talking about belonging. People asked me, what is this? Isn't it just employee engagement? Why do we need this? Some people say we have inclusion. Why do we need belonging? And let me say this loud and clear. Inclusion and belonging are not the same thing. Okay. Inclusion and belonging are not the same thing. And here's some important ways in which they differ. With inclusion is an invitation. I have to include you.
You have to be chosen.
You have to be chosen, which means the power rests with me. There's a power dynamic in inclusion that we never talk about.
Right.
You have to be invited. And then you only have the choice of saying yes, no, or maybe.
Exactly.
Belonging is about me, how I feel in a space, and you cannot tell me whether I belong or not. Right? Inclusion, second, is about behavior. What do I do to make somebody feel included? Belonging is primarily about feeling. Do I feel seen here, heard here, respected here, valued here? They're not the same thing.
They're not the same. And too often, those seen, heard, valued are things that are not, I feel like they're not put on the table. Like, who cares what you feel?
Yes.
Yeah. Who cares if you don't feel valued?
Yes.
But that's so important into the belonging equation.
You know who cares? In 2021, corporate America cared. Because 4 million people who did not feel belonging quit their jobs and sat home. That's who cares. That's who cares. Okay?
If not for the way that it affects the bottom line.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's who cares. You know who cares today? The healthcare industry cares. Why? A bunch of burnt out nurses and doctors have said, enough.
Enough is enough.
I don't belong. You don't respect me. You don't value me. You don't respect the contributions I made during COVID.
I'm out. Yeah.
That's who cares. You know who else cares? The patients who don't have enough doctors, nurses, CNAs to care for them. Because the burnt out doctors and nurses have checked out. That's who cares. So when we say who cares what you think, these people care. You know who else cares? Our children care. Why? Because teachers are checking out.
Yeah.
Because we don't respect them, we don't appreciate them. So they're saying, do send them out.
Goodbye. Yeah.
That's who cares. And ultimately, as society, we should care because healthcare, education, and children's future depend on the very people that we don't show enough respect, appreciation, inclusion, and embrace for.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing this to the table. Thank you for really breaking the code, right? And I loved when I think of the journey that when we talk about breaking the code, it's not a one day, I figured out that this is my code and I need to break it. It's
Lifetime.
It's a lifetime of ebb and flow, sit in a space,
Yes.
and then observe.
Yes.
And that's also sitting with ourselves.
So yeah, the most uncomfortable thing.
The most uncomfortable thing, and observing, and then say, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
How do I promote the glory?
Mm-hmm.
And then we work on the glory, but let's really amplify.
Hashtag amplify the glory.
Amplify the glory.
Yes.
I want to add anything to that. I think that is a great way to end this segment of Break the Code.
It's been wonderful to be
It's
here.
been absolutely
Thank you so much.
incredible. Thank you. Can we hear some applause?
And thanks to the audience for sitting through with us.
Yes.
It's been awesome.
Abba, thank you for taking the time. She is about to catch a flight.
Yes.
She's had a long day, but I really appreciate you taking the time to share this. I know that I'm changed. You know, I thought I understood it, but now really hearing it from you, it's been absolutely transformational for me. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. And if your audience wants to learn more, you can either go to abammambo.com where I do posts. It's my speaker website, or they can go to Belonging IQ as well, which is the consulting side. But we do a lot of work in the corporate space, but now we're branching out into home, community, and healthcare. Because like we said, we need to bring a sense of belonging in all these different spheres. So thank you for having me today.